Hey everyone, it's Bradley Bush with another algebra video for you. Today we are talking about factoring by trial and error. Thanks so much for coming to my channel. I appreciate it. I hope you enjoy it. And let's get going. Factoring by trial and error. Well, the main idea here is that you're just reversing FOIL. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with FOIL, it is just an acronym to help you understand how to multiply two binomials. Binomials being two polynomials with two terms. So you can see here I have two binomials. I have x plus 2 and x minus 3, and I'm multiplying them together. If I'm multiplying them together, then I can use FOIL to help me remember to get all of the parts of the multiplication. So the first is the x and the x, the first two terms in each of the polynomials. And so I have the f gives us x times x. The outer would be the O in blue, so it's the x in the x plus 2 and the negative 3 in the x minus 3. So it's the two far ends of the, if you're looking at it visually. So x times negative 3 gives us the O. The inner are the two inside terms, so the 2 from the x plus 2 and the x from the x minus 3. And that's in red, so we have 2 times x. And then the last, which is green, would be the 2 times the negative 3. So the second terms in each of the polynomials. So if you think about this as first, outer, inner, last, if you just think about about FOIL and the process, then we know we take the two inside terms and we combine them. So the outer and the inner, so the negative 3x that we get from the outer and the 2x from the inner, we get negative 3x and 2x plus negative 3x plus 2x gives us just negative x. So we can see that the negative x, that just came, that came from the combination of the outer and the inner terms. But the x squared and the negative 6 in the answer, so when we multiply x plus 2 and x minus 3 together, we get x squared minus x minus 6. The x squared is just a product of the first two. So it's just f. All we need is f to find x squared. And the negative 6, the last term here, all we need is the L. All we need is the L term, so the negative 2 and the negative 3. So if we wanted to reverse this and say, well, now we are just given x squared minus x minus 6. If we're just given that, and we're supposed to go back to the beginning, back to the factoring, before we did the FOIL, and say we didn't know how to FOIL, or we hadn't just FOILed, maybe I should say that, that's probably a better way to say it. We hadn't just FOILed, and we were like, well, we know what we have. We know how the process works. We know how we got here. So we would know that the x and the x, remember, the x just comes from the FOIL, from the first. So that means if I am going to multiply the first two terms, the first two things I have here, probably going to have to be like x and x, because whatever I do, whatever I get has to be a product of x squared. So we don't really have a lot of options, right? If we want to take x squared and say what two things multiply together to get x squared, we have an x and an x. How about the next? We know the negative 6 is a product of the two last terms. So negative 6 is what two things can we multiply together to get negative 6? So negative 3 and 2. We could do that. We could also do maybe the opposite. So we could do 3 and negative 2. We could do 6 and 1. Or negative 6 and 1. We can do 6 and negative 1. What else could we do? Any other products of negative 6? So we know that these two spots, what remains in our factoring, has to come. It's one of these combinations. It's either -2 and +3, +3, -2, or the other two options we have, the -6, 1, 1, or -1, 6. So all we do is the trial and error now is we just choose one and see how it works out, right? We FOIL it out and see what what we get for the middle term. So let's choose the 3 and -2, just for kicks and giggles. So we chose 3 and -2. We had 4 options of 2 numbers, and we just chose one. And if we multiplied that out now, if we wanted to check that, because when you do the trial and error, you've got to check to see if you multiply things out right. If we quickly did FOIL, we get x and x, we get x squared, which we knew, right, because we chose that to be right. And let's do the last term. 3 and -2 gives us -6. The last term we got right. We knew that because we chose it to be correct. But now the inner two, we don't know. We just have to figure out what those are now. So let's do that. So we have 3 and x, which would give us 3x, and then we have -2 and x, which gives us -2x. And we multiply those together, and we get positive x. So we get x squared, which is correct. We get plus x, which is not correct, and we get -6. Again, we're looking for this negative x in the middle. So the two numbers, the 3 and the -2 we chose, those are not the right two. This is the trial and error part. But if we look at it, we're pretty close, right? We just have a sign difference. So what if we went back to this and we're like, okay, it's not positive. Let's choose the other one. Let's choose the 3 and, or -3 and 2, because I think that will do it for us. And now let's repeat the checking. And I'm just going to erase the middle two terms because we know the other ones are right. The outer, or the first and the last terms, we know they're right because we chose the numbers to be that way in the variables. So -3x is one of the middle terms. And then 2 times x is the other one. -3 and positive, excuse me, -3 and positive x give us a -x. And that was right. So we got back to our original. So we just factored. We factored x squared minus x minus 6 by trial and error by reversing the FOILing process. And it factors into x minus 3 times x plus 2. So that's really the gist of factoring by trial and error. You're just reversing the multiplication process, and you use what you know about the process to kind of guide your method and your thought process, and you try to make educated guesses that way. So let's do some examples. We've got 5 examples here. Let's factor all of these using this trial and error method. And we'll go a little bit faster than we did before because now we know kind of the theory behind it. We will want to remember, though, that we could have some greatest common factors that we'll need to factor out before we start to factor. So we'll check that for each of these. Example A gives us 9x squared minus 9x plus 2. And we're supposed to factor. Do we have anything common? 9, 9, 2, those don't share anything, so let's just start. So we know, trial and error, right? We know from the reverse FOIL that the first 2 spots we're looking for are going to be products of 3x squared. So 9x squared. So our options are maybe 3x and 3x. That's an option to give us 9x squared. We could also do x and 9x. That's also an option. We'll keep that in mind if this doesn't work out. But let's start with 3x and 3x. All right, now we know that the last 2 spots in our FOILing, or sorry, in our factoring, correspond to the last term, the constant term. Here we have 2 is our constant term. So factors of 2, 2 and 1. We don't have a lot of options, right? So let's do plus 2 and plus 1. But as I'm staring at this, I just noticed something that we might want to remember or keep in mind. We have a negative here. So, and in our factoring, our proposed factoring, we have no negatives. So we're never going to get a negative out. So when we do that, we now FOIL this out to try to get the middle term to see if it is negative 9x. It's never going to be because we don't have negatives. So we need to introduce some negatives. And the only way to have a positive 2 with negatives is to have 2 negatives. So we will, let's do negative 2 and negative 1 for our possible last terms. Now let's see if this works. Now we just have to multiply it out. So let's check it. And we're the first term, so we'll write out the FOIL, F-O-I-L. The first term we know is right, 3x times 3x. That gives us 9x squared. Remember, we chose that to be correct. And the last term we'll do is negative 2 and negative 1. We know that's also going to be correct. That gives us 2, so good. Now the middle two, they're the ones we're interested in. So the outer gives us 3x and negative 1. So negative 3x and negative 1 gives us negative 3x. And let's do the inner. So negative 2 times 3x. That gives us negative 6x. Negative 6x and negative 3x give us negative 9x. Is that what we wanted? Bingo, that was what we wanted. So we actually chose the correct factoring the first time. It doesn't always happen that way, but it worked out for us. We're done. Let's move on to the next one. And if you guys have questions, please leave comments down below in the video. Also, if you find this helpful or if you'd like it, please give me a thumbs up. Please subscribe to the channel. I'd love your support. I'm always wanting to grow my channel and provide more videos for you. 2x squared plus 5x minus 3. That's the next example. And again, if we're just guessing, we're going to do the reverse FOIL. So we're looking for the first two terms. And those are strictly associated with 2x squared. So let's say 2x and x, because that's one of the best options for two things that multiply together to give us 2x squared, right? 2x and x. All right. Let's now turn our attention to the last term, which is negative 3. So let's do negative 3 and 1, just because those are quick factors that came to my head. They could be wrong. They could be right. We'll see, right? So now we check. Did we guess the right factoring? So again, we'll do the FOIL. So the first, we know actually, okay, I'll do the first. I was going to say we don't need to do the first and the last because we know they're right, because we chose them to be right, but maybe it's helpful. So 2x and x gives us 2x squared. And the last is negative 3 and 1 gives us negative 3. So again, we knew those were right because we chose them to be right. Now, let's do the middle. The outer would be 2x and 1, which gives us 2x. And the inner is negative 3x, or negative 3 times x. So 2x and negative 3x give us negative x. Is that what we need? Nope. We need a positive 5x. Okay. Well, let's keep going. Let's redo. We guessed and we got it wrong. It's okay. That's what this whole process is about. Trial and error. So we need to rethink this. Well, what can we do? Let's flip the positive and the negative and see if that changes anything. So we will erase our checking the inner and the outer, and let's change the positive and negative. Does that help us? The inner and the outer, let's just write them down. The outer is negative 2x. The inner is 3x. And that does not help. That gives us just a positive x. So here's a thought. Let's keep switching things around. Let's change the 2x and the x, the first two positions. Let's switch the 2x to the second. So 2x is now in the second polynomial and x is in the first. And let's see how that works. Again, we're going to try our trial and error. We're going to do the inner and the outer terms. So the outer term is just negative x, and the inner term is 6x. And you add those together, and we get 5x. That is what we want. So that's it. We got it. We found the correct factoring. So there's a trial and error process. You could get it the first time, you could get it the third time. It just, depends. And the more you do it, the better you get. So don't always feel like it's going to take a lot of time to do this. Generally speaking, you can do it fairly quickly once you get the hang of it. It looks like here I can pull out a 2. So let's do that from each of these. So that gives us 3x squared. So our original is 6x squared minus 50x minus 56. So we can pull out a 2 from each of the terms. And we get negative 25x, and we get negative 28. Okay. So we're going to factor this now. And there's always going to be a negative 2 out front, but it's okay. We're going to factor the rest. We're going to factor 3x squared minus 25x minus 28. So if we're looking at our factoring, we know the first two terms again in our factoring are going to be associated with 3x squared. So let's just do 3x and x. And the second two terms are going to be associated with negative 28. Let's do 7 and 4. How does that sound? 7 and 4 gives us 28. 14 and 2 also gives us 28, but we'll see how 7 and 4 works. And we need a negative in here, so let's say 7's negative. So 3x minus 7. No, let's do 3x plus 4. And x minus 7. Now we're checking, so we've made our guess. And now we're going to check. Again, we know the 3x squared is correct. We know the last term is negative 28. That's correct. But let's check the middle too. So the outer is negative 21x. And the inner is 4x. And that gives us not exactly what we wanted, right? That gives us negative 17x. And we want a negative 25. How can we change that up? Let's try 14 and 2. Or 28 and 1. How about we try 28 and 1? That's an option, right? Try 28 and 1. Let's do 28 here and 1. So again, this is really, you're really just guessing and checking. And I didn't do these beforehand on purpose so that you could see really the guess and check, because it literally, you can't, generally speaking, you're not going to get these right every time the first time. You're going to mess up. So I wanted you to see how it worked when you mess up. And hopefully that kind of gives you some, it makes you feel a little bit better about your guessing and your checking. Now, just as we look at this, let's do the middle two terms again and see how they work out. So the outer are negative 3x, and the inner is 28x. And that gives us positive 25x. That's super close. We want a negative, so that means all we need to do is change the signs and we're good. So this is a negative, this is now a positive. So when we change these up one more time, the outer is now positive 3x, and then the inner is negative 28x, which gives us negative 25x. And we have found, wow, that's a terrible 25. We've found our factoring. Whoa, but we forgot one thing. We still have a 2 that's hanging out in front. So I need to put that out front. So we have that 2 still there. Now we're done. Perfect. We finished. Let's move on to D. So we have 2 more. As we look at this, is there a number that we can pull out of everything? 6, 19, negative 19, and 15. I don't think so. But we do have an x squared y. Each of those terms have an x squared y. And the polynomial I'm looking at is 15x to the 4th y minus 19x to the 3rd y plus 6x squared y. So let's pull out an x squared y from everything and see what that leaves us with. If we have an x squared y out front, then we are left with 15x squared minus 19x plus 6. And now we will do factoring by grouping. So we pulled out the greatest common factor. Now we'll do factoring by grouping on the middle, or what's left, meaning 15x squared minus 19x plus 6. Okay, well, let's start. I'm going to put that x squared y up just so I don't forget it. And now let's start the factoring. We'll put our foil, put our foil out here so we can check it. Factors of 15x. Let's do 5 and 3. How does that sound? So 5x and 3x. And positive 6. Remember, we have a negative in the 19x in the middle term, so we need to have a negative. We need to introduce a negative there somewhere. So I'm going to have both of these be negative, negative 3 and negative 2. I'm just guessing 2 things that are both negative that multiply together to give me 6. Now let's foil it out and see how we did. Let's check it. 15x squared is our first term. We knew that was right. Our last term we know is right. Also negative 6. Let's do the inner and the outer and see if we got those right. So the outer is negative 10x, and the inner is negative 9x. Hey, because it's negative 19x. We did it. That we just guessed right on the first time. Doesn't always happen, but sometimes it does. Now our last one. Can you see anything common there between the terms? There's 6x squared minus 7xy minus 5y squared. There isn't a variable that's shared between all of those, and there isn't a number that's common. So we can't pull anything out. Let's just start. Let's do our double set of parentheses. We'll bring up our foil so we can check it afterwards. And again, we know that the first 2 terms are associated with 6x squared. So 3x and 2x. Let's see if that works. Hopefully it does. And the second two terms, again, are associated with negative 5y squared. We don't have a lot of options there. So there's a negative, so let's do negative 5y and positive y. See if this works. The first term is what we wanted, right? 6x squared. The last term is what we wanted because, again, we chose them that way. Negative 5y squared. But the two that we're curious about are the middle two. So outer, we get 3xy. And the inner gives us 5 and 2 gives us 10, negative 10xy. And together, that gives us negative 7 xy. Is that what we want? Hey, that is what we want. So we guessed it right. Again, it doesn't always happen. Sometimes it does and we get lucky. That's it. Thanks for watching. Hopefully this was helpful and hope you have a great day.